All right, we're gonna start with trigonometry. So, important thing to know about trigonometry. It works in circles. The circles have two really important units, degrees and radians. Degrees are really easy. It's like 100 degrees, 20 degrees, all of those. You know, just normal degrees that we learn when we're younger. Radian is the measure of the arc that's equal to the measure of the radius. The radius is half of the diameter, so the radian is the arc, that part of the circle that's equal to that in measure. Circles can be split up into four parts. Quadrants that go from 0 to 90 degrees, the first quadrant, from 90 to 180 degrees, the second quadrant, from 180 to 270 degrees, which is the third quadrant, the fourth quadrant, which is 270 degrees to 360 degrees. Now, there's another way of splitting up these quadrants, and that is by pi. The first quadrant is from 2 pi, or 0, to pi over 2. The second quadrant goes from pi over 2 to pi. Third quadrant is from pi to 3 pi over 2. And fourth quadrant is from 3 pi over 2 to 2 pi, or back to 0. So, we've got some trigonometric functions that are also used in trigonometry. First one is sine. Sine is measured, or calculated, by dividing, so it's sine of this angle, let's say angle C, is calculated by dividing the measure of the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse, which is the side opposite to the 90-degree angle in the triangle. So sine of C would be AB over BC. Cosine is calculated by dividing the adjacent side, the measure of the adjacent side, over the measure of the hypotenuse. So in the case of C, it would be AC divided by CB. Tangent is calculated by dividing the opposite side over the adjacent side. مثلا, tangent of C would be AB, which is the opposite side, over AC, which is the adjacent side. An easy way to remember what's divided by what is SOHCAHTOA. Okay? Sine equals opposite over hypotenuse, cosine equals adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent equals opposite over adjacent. Here's the thing though, there is another way to measure, or to calculate tangent, which is sine over cosine. And there's cotangent, which is calculated by 1 over tangent, or cosine over sine, or adjacent over opposite. So the cotangent of point C would be adjacent, which is AC, over opposite, which is AB. Here's an important thing that you need to remember. Sine and cosine are always going to be between -1 and 1. If you get an answer that's not in that range, that means that either you did something wrong or there's no solution to that problem. So there's a formula that we can use. We need to memorize this formula. Formula is cosine squared x plus sine squared x is equal to 1. So you can use any variation of this, like 1 minus cosine squared x is equal to sine squared x, or 1 minus sine squared x is equal to cosine squared x. Just whatever you need to use when you're simplifying to get the answer that you want to get. There's another formula, which is tan squared x plus 1 is equal to 1 over cosine squared x. Again, you can use the variations of this, which would be cosine squared x is equal to 1 over tan squared x plus 1. You can use that as your simplifying expressions if need be. Here's something that's pretty important, just so that you can figure stuff out on your own if you forget a specific formula. Sine is along the y-axis, and cosine is the x-axis. So in quadrant 1, sine is positive because it's positive y-axis. Cosine is also positive because it's a positive side of the y-axis. In quadrant 2, sine is going to be positive, but cosine is going to be negative. In quadrant 3, cosine is going to be negative because we're still on the negative side of the x-axis. And this time sine is also going to be negative because we're on the negative side. And then in quadrant 4, cosine is going to be positive because we're back to the positive side of the x-axis, but sine is going to be negative because we're still on the negative side of the y-axis. So from this, there's a bunch of formulas that we can figure out that are pretty important that we can use in our exams. These two can be derived from the quadrants and the circles. So first, second, third, and fourth. And as we said, sines along the y, cosines along the x. So, and let's call this angle right here, let's call that angle alpha. So, sine of pi minus alpha would put it where? In the second quadrant, which means that sine of pi minus alpha is sine alpha. But sine of pi plus alpha would be in the negative part of the y-axis in the third quadrant, which would mean it's minus sine alpha. Sine of minus alpha would put it down here, which is still in the negative part of the y-axis, which would make it minus sine alpha. You can see I've got the formulas listed right here. Cosine is similar. Cosine of pi minus alpha is minus cosine alpha because we're on the negative side of the x-axis. Cosine of pi plus alpha is minus cosine alpha because we're still on the negative side of the x-axis. And cosine of minus alpha puts us in the positive side of the x-axis, which makes it cosine alpha. Again, I've got the formulas listed here for you to refer to. Now, here's where it gets a little bit tricky. Cosine of minus pi over 2 is the same as cosine of pi over 2. Here's why. Cosine does not take a minus. This is what we learned in class. Cosine does not take a minus. It only takes a minus if it's in the negative side, obviously. But when you're just solving like this, like, no, it doesn't take a minus unless it's one of the formulas that you've memorized. So then, but sine of minus pi over 2 is minus sine of pi over 2. And tangent of minus pi over 2 is minus tangent of pi over 2. So if you see this written and you're trying to simplify it, you can turn it into this. Again, I've got the formulas listed here. You're welcome to refer back to them when you need. Now, sine of pi over 2 minus alpha, if you want to switch between sine and cosine and tangent and cotangent. So sine of pi over 2 minus alpha is cosine alpha. Cosine of pi over 2 minus alpha is sine alpha. Tangent of pi over 2 minus alpha is cotangent alpha. Cotangent of pi over 2 minus alpha is tangent alpha. They're all the same. If you've got pi over 2 minus the angle, it's gonna be positive. And I can prove to you why. If you look at this circle right here, pi over 2 is right here, minus alpha, that puts in here. That makes every single one of them positive. Now, sine of pi over 2 plus alpha would put it over here. Gives you cosine alpha because, like we said, cosine doesn't take negative at all. So cosine it doesn't take negative. You kind of need to memorize that unless you're using one of these formulas here. So cosine alpha. This one, it's kind of confusing. I know, just memorize it and you'll be on the safe side. Okay, so, and then cosine of pi over 2 plus alpha would put it right here. It's minus sine alpha. That feels a bit wrong. I'm not sure why, but yeah, just, you need to memorize this one. This part you can't derive from here. This one you can. This one you can. So cosine of pi over 2 plus alpha is minus sine alpha. Tangent of pi over 2 plus alpha is minus cotangent alpha. And cotangent of pi over 2 plus alpha is minus tangent alpha. So these are the list of formulas that you need to memorize or be able to derive. If you want to take a screenshot, go ahead.